How many times have you been looking for a recipe online only to be bombarded by adverts or somebody's life story with a massive long exposition at the beginning of the article? Mostly so they can inject more ads into the article, by the way. Well, Mealie is a self-hosted recipe manager that strips all that stuff away for you. So I'm going to show you in today's video how to deploy Mealie onto your Tailnet and access it from anywhere using Tailscale. So I'm going to split this video up into a few sections. This first few minutes we'll be looking at the application itself. The second half we'll be looking at how to deploy Mealie using Docker Compose. And then at the end, there's one more thing, because you can actually make AI do stuff with Mealie now. It's a fairly new feature, but it kind of works. So there'll be chapters down below, along with all the links to all the Docker Compose file and all that kind of stuff you need in the description. So let's add something to this, because I know you haven't seen this before. Smoked salmon teriyaki recipe. I don't know. Let's just pick a random one and see how much of a life story. The allure of teriyaki smokes. Oh goodness. I just want the recipe. Okay, I'm going to copy that URL to my clipboard. I'm then going to go to create and import from URL. I'm going to create this recipe inside my little Mealie vault right here. So this goes out to recipesaver.com, and scrapes the contents of the website, puts all the steps one by one in here for me, gets me all the ingredients. How nice is this? I can register that I made this, for example, 2 weeks ago. Fishy. That's how it was. Add that to the timeline, and then I can actually look at all the different times I made this dish. Isn't that fun? Yeah, there you go. Pretty fun. Under the edit option, there's a bunch of other stuff here. You can be like, total time is 2 hours, for example. Prep time is 20 minutes, 20 mins, and then 2 hours, whatever. You can modify all sorts of stuff under here. You can make it show in a landscape view so that the picture of the fish shows at the top. I actually kind of like that view better, but yeah, entirely up to you. It's a self-hosted application, so you are in full control. I love that. You can add a bunch of ingredients. You can add tags. You can, if there's a special thing, so for example, I don't know, fish hook, for example, on hand. Let's create that. Tags, I'm going to put salmon as a tag. Why not? Oh, salmon. Yeah, create the tag, and then a category I'm going to put as fish. Just did that same mistake twice with the UX, didn't I? Okay, so that's how the application itself does the basics, and let's just save those changes and see how they get presented now. You can see that they've got all the prep time stuff right here. In fact, actually, I think I might prefer the non-landscape view. I might be full of it. Let's just put it back to non-landscape view and click on save. There we go. Yeah, actually, I think I prefer that one. So you've got a picture there, and then you've got all the stuff just here. Now, if you're in a cook mode and you want to just literally have the basics on the screen in front of you, that's what that button does there. And I think it's really nicely laid out. So that's the basic recipe stuff, like I can give it stars and put it in my favorites, all the rest of it. Now let's look at the meal planner, because this one's actually got a real amount of utility. Like, people integrate this with Home Assistant, so you can actually have dashboards up on your fridge or on a little tablet on the wall or something, or even just pull out your phone when you're at the grocery store and say, like, what's for dinner in 3 days time? Maybe I should buy some fresh veg whilst I'm here. For example, I'm going to go in here and click edit, and I'm going to roll the dice for lunch. Why not? It's going to give me chocolate cookies. It's going to give me pork with roasted carrots and rice for breakfast. All right, whatever. Random dinner. Chocolate cookies again. Yeah. Here we go. All right. So you get the idea. You can create a meal plan, and then this way the entire family can look ahead and see what's coming throughout the week, and they can dive in and all that kind of stuff. The meal planner is fantastic, and it's probably the single biggest reason to use Mealie over something like a paper recipe card or something like that. I mean, yes, you can write on a little chalkboard on the side of the fridge or whatever, but this is pretty nice. Now, the shopping list options is also pretty useful. Let's call it ABC, and then you and household party can be in, like, I need milk and eggs and all that kind of stuff. Like, you know how a shopping list works. Pretty interesting. The timeline here, this is like a global view of all the recipes that you've had, and you can see that I made cookies and brisket and salmon and a bunch of other stuff. I'm getting hungry making this video. But then the cookbooks on the left you can create. So for example, I'll show you later in the video, my wife has a bunch of these HelloFresh recipe cards. For example, I could literally make a HelloFresh specific cookbook if I wanted to, or a barbecue smoking cookbook or whatever. And then there are a bunch of different ways to organize these things within Mealie as well. That's Mealie, really. There's a bunch of stuff under settings which for the most part you don't really have to worry about. I mean, I made a video a couple of weeks ago on Pocket ID for OpenID Connect, so this integrates with that nicely too. I didn't configure it, but you can also have this configured to send out emails through SMTP. I don't know what that purpose would serve. Maybe you could email yourself a shopping list, but with Tailscale you can just access this from anywhere. Notice that this is on a fully qualified domain name as it is. There's a bunch of stuff here with users. I suppose that one could be useful. You want to create a user for you, your partner, or maybe a kid or whatever. But yeah, I mean, there is a bunch of stuff under the hood with Mealie that you could get into, but really the core of the application really is just looking at recipes and finding a good way to surface them. So you can search with a keyboard shortcut of a / and just type brisket, for example, and there it is. You know, there's my brisket recipe, for example. So yeah, I think with that quick overview of the Mealie application out the way, it's time to move on to how to deploy it with Docker Compose. Now, I'm sure this will come as a huge surprise to those of you familiar with the channel, but we're going to deploy Mealie today using Docker. In fact, we're going to deploy it on that little Dell 1 litre small form factor PC that I've featured in all of the self-hosting, the Get Started with Self-Hosting series that we've been doing on the channel lately. There's a link to that video series up there, that playlist. Now, if we head over to mealie.io, the project itself recommends that you use Docker to deploy it as well. In fact, if we go to the installation checklist just here, you can see at the top of their documentation, they have a wonderful step-by-step guide here, honestly. If you're new to all this stuff, you'll actually learn quite a bit in this documentation. Or you can just copy and paste the Docker Compose YAML file, which I have customized for our needs just here. And this file, by the way, is linked in the description down below in my sort of code snippets repo that accompanies, well, pretty much every video that we make on this channel. So there's a lot going on in this file. Let's break it down a little bit. First of all, we have the Mealie TS container. This essentially is called a sidecar container. So you have the main app over here, and you have a little tiny sidecar app over here that's just running Tailscale, because Mealie itself doesn't have Tailscale installed in it. So we wouldn't be able to access it over our Tailnet remotely without this sidecar container. So that's what this first sort of set of stuff here is doing. We need to get ourselves an auth key to put into this file here, which is really easily done by heading over to tailscale.com, go to settings and then keys, and then generate an auth key. I know I'm going quickly, but I do this a lot on the channel, so please pause, rewind, whatever you need to do to make this this work for you. But I'm going to create this key here called Mealie. That's optional. I'm going to select reusable because I'm doing a demo, so I will likely tear this up and down a few times. Expiration, this is only the length of time that this key is allowed to authorize services to your Tailnet. If you authorize a service and it lives longer than 90 days, the service will stay authenticated. But if you want to re-authenticate the service, you'll need to regenerate this auth key after 90 days. Ephemeral, if the service goes offline, it will also disappear from your Tailnet. And then tags, we're not going to talk about tags today, but they're very powerful and you can learn more about those over at the Tailscale documentation. So I'm going to generate a key and then just copy that to my clipboard, go back to VS Code and just paste in that value right here. And that's all we need to do for the Tailscale TS sidecar container. Except I suppose in my case, in the self-hosted series, this is where I've put all of the app data for all of our containers. So mount SSD1, app data, and then the name of the app, Mealie, and then I've got a Tailscale subdirectory under that. So you will want to customize this little portion here so that it matches in both places as your sort of app data path. And that's what you need to do for the sidecar. So we can actually collapse this now. This is a YAML file, by the way, if you're not familiar with what we're looking at here. You have a bunch of, I guess, like top-level keys, and each item in this, I think it's a dictionary underneath this key, it belongs to this kind of like parent here. So if you look on the left here in VS Code, you can actually collapse the entire sidecar container to kind of clean up your view a little bit. Now, Mealie itself is another straightforward deployment here. You can see that we've got the image we're using from the GitHub container registry. This is the current tag at the time of filming, 2.8.0, and that comes from the Mealie project itself from their documentation, as you can see right here. So I assume this updates. In fact, let's just go and check that. So in fact, yeah, you can see v 2.8 is the latest one, but where do we go these days? Releases, packages, probably. No, releases. Where did you put? They used to be at the top. There we go. 2.8 is the most recent one, March 18th, and today's June the 24th. So not the most fresh release, but yeah, it's totally fine. It's only a couple of months. Okay, so that's where we get that from. That's where we get this sort of tag from here. Container name, this is optional, but it just keeps things clean on the remote host if you don't have a randomly generated name for your container. I always like this one here. Restart unless stopped. Yeah, I've actually, since my Linux server.io days, in those early containers that we wrote, always preferred unless stopped. I mean, some people put always in here. Like if I've stopped the container and I reboot the host, I don't want it to always restart. So that's why I put unless stopped in there. This line is where we connect the sidecar container of Mealie TS to our main application of Mealie. So this is how we sort of merge those two containers together and put this thing on your Tailnet. This name here of service Mealie TS must match the top level key of the previous YAML block, I suppose. So line 2 here, this key here of Mealie TS, that's how Docker Compose knows how to reference that other service, is with that string there. Okay, so this is a bunch of stuff that comes from the Mealie project itself about limiting the memory usage to 1 gig. Sure, fine, whatever. The Linux kernel is pretty good at managing this stuff itself, but it's not going to hurt to have a limit, so we may as well leave it there. This path again is where we store the persistent data, so this is where the recipes themselves are actually going to live on your little computer that you're using to do this self-hosted project. And now we come to the fun part, the environment variables. So allow sign up false. This might seem like a little bit of a weird one, but we don't want anybody to be able to sign up to this willy-nilly. But out of the box, it comes with a default admin user, which we can change the username and password later. This PGID and PUID thing here, 1000 numbers, refer to the user ID, the Linux user ID that's going to own the files in the bind mounted volumes that you've set here. So under this volumes line right here, this 1000 option is that's the user that's going to own those files. Time zone, obviously set that accordingly, you know, America, New York for me on the East Coast. Then base URL. This is an interesting one. Okay, so where do we get this piece of information? Well, we are going to use the Tailscale Mealie sidecar container as a reverse proxy for Mealie. And what's a reverse proxy? So when we want to access this web application, typically you go to an IP address number and a port number. But I hate that. I hate ports. It's insecure. You can't verify the identity. We can do better. So, okay, so we're going to use Tailscale as our reverse proxy today. But where do we get the value of mealie.velociraptor-noodlefish? Well, if we look back at line 4, you'll notice that the hostname variable here was set to Mealie. So if I called this, I don't know, goldfish, the name that this container would get on my Tailnet would actually be goldfish. Okay, so you see how those two things link together now. But what about the rest of it? Where does the Velociraptor bit come from? Well, that comes from my Tailscale admin console. So if I go to the DNS options right here, you'll see that my Tailnet has a nice name of velociraptor-noodlefish.ts.net. Now I can rename this Tailnet at any time if I want to. In fact, out of the box, Tailscale provides a free, it's not the most pretty name in the world if I'm honest, but that's why we provide you the option to re-roll the dice and rename your Tailnet with something a bit more aloof perhaps. So we've got something with a tail and something with scales. Very good. Okay, so down here also we need to make sure that we've got Magic DNS enabled as well as HTTPS certificates. So that's all of the Tailscale stuff taken care of. That's all you have to do, except copy this one file across here too. Mealie runs on the port 9000. You remember how I was talking about IP addresses and port numbers? We have to know what port Mealie is running on, and in this case, this application runs on port 9000. So you'll want to modify this serve.json file to be the port of the application that you're running. So in our case, as I say, it's 9000. If it was a different application, you would just literally modify the port number to be whatever the application is using. So we're going to leave that one at 9000. We're also going to proxy TCP port 443, so for HTTPS requests, and have them come through to this reverse proxy. So all we need to do now is connect to our remote host. And as I mentioned, I'm using the little Dell box that we used in the first few parts of this self-hosting playlist. And this box has a few prerequisites that if you didn't follow those videos, you're going to need to make sure are installed and ready to go. You need to make sure you've got Docker on this host, and also make sure that you've got Tailscale. So Docker is going to be our application runtime, and Tailscale is on there mostly so that we can use Tailscale SSH to connect to that remote host without worrying about SSH keys, but also it has a trick up its sleeve. In VS Code, there is a Tailscale extension, and you can get that by going to the extensions page right here, typing in Tailscale, and installing the Tailscale extension into your VS Code. Then make sure you're logged into Tailscale on your client. So this is a Mac OS laptop, of course. I'm logged into my Tailnet on that MacBook. The VS Code extension will then pick up that authentication, and I can now connect to my remote host at pve.whatever it was, pve.velociraptor. It can now connect to that and the file system on that node in VS Code. And so under PVE, if I right click on this, I've got a bunch of options. You can change your SSH username if you need to. I'm just SSH'd in as root because it's easier for videos. It's perhaps not the best security practice, but it's just me. It's a single user system, so root. Deal, as I would say to my 4-year-old. You have to deal with it. All right, change root directory. This one might be useful actually here. So I'm going to select /mnt. So that way I don't have access to the entire file system of the computer. And then under app data, I've got to make sure I've got a few things created here. So I actually want to just open a terminal window at the Mealie directory under app data. So if we look in our compose file, we'll see that all of these paths need to exist. So if I do a pwd, we can see that we're currently in mount ssd1 app data Mealie. Now I need to make sure that I have a file now under, where is it here? Mealie Tailscale, so I need to do make dir -p because I'm going to do more than one directory deep that doesn't exist. So make dir -p tailscale /config. So what I now need to do is copy the contents of serve.json to the remote host. So I'm going to do a command A to copy the entire file contents, command C to copy it to my clipboard, right click on the config directory and just type in serve.json. That's now going to create a empty file on the remote host into which I can just paste my Tailscale serve configuration. And that's it. That's all we need to worry about with the serve configuration. That's that bit that's configured here, by the way. And then in my compose.yaml file, I'm just going to paste this in the remote host as well. We're actually ready to go. So I'm going to come back out 2 levels. So I'm in the root of the Mealie directory. I want to be in the same context path as or same directory as the compose.yaml file. I can then do a docker compose pull. This is going to pull down the Tailscale image, which probably should already exist because I'm using it for other images on this, other containers on this host. And then it's also going to pull down the Mealie container as well. So I want the record to show that Mealie currently doesn't exist on this Tailnet. But simply by doing a docker compose up, I'm actually going to do a logs -f as well. Docker compose logs -f to follow the logs of what's going on here. You can see that we're now proxying port 9000 from within the Mealie container out onto our Tailnet. So if we go back to the dashboard here, look, we've got Mealie. All right, so let's get our fully qualified domain name here of mealie.velociraptor-noodlefish and paste that into our web browser. The first time you do this, it will take 10 to 20 seconds to generate a TLS certificate because Tailscale serve in the background, you don't have to do anything, but it's reaching out to Let's Encrypt to generate a full TLS certificate for this instance. Now sometimes, because I mess about with demos and stuff, I end up needing to go into incognito mode just to create stuff because it kind of gets a bit confused. So hopefully that won't happen to you, but if it does and you get an insecure message here, don't worry, it's probably working. If you just go into incognito mode, you can verify it's working by going to certificate is valid, Let's Encrypt, and if you see this all stuff here of issued on today and then expires on whenever, you're good to go. All right, so the first login, as I talked about, you need to enter a username and a password. which is the default settings. It's then going to ask you to create a user in this sort of onboarding wizard. So I'm just going to create Zaphod. And then once I've finished filling out that form, I'm just going to click on the next button, enable public access. This one actually is pretty worth talking about, because a lot of times when you want to access a recipe, you don't really want to have to log in, or at least I don't. I want to grab my iPad, I want to go to the URL and pull up the recipe. So by enabling public access, I'm able to do that without having to log in to see the... I mean, there's nothing, it's not Fort Knox. We're storing recipes in here and, nothing crazy. So I'm going to submit that, and then hopefully user updated. Good. I actually think we are ready to go. So I'm going to click on the home button. As you would expect, there are no recipes right now. So, I don't know, the best cookie recipe ever. Let's just pick one at random. This one. I have no idea. How much life story have we got in this one? Yeah. Where is the actual recipe? This is all just so they can serve you more ads. You can tell I've got my ad blocker working on this network. I've got an AdGuard home instance on this network. Anyway, I digress slightly. Import by URL. So I'm going to create my first recipe by importing via URL. So let's create that. It's now going to strip all of the life story. It's going to strip out just the useful bit. And look at that. Isn't that wonderful? So we can see now that you've got all the steps here of preheat the oven. Here's all your ingredients, etc., etc. What does the checkbox do? I often wonder that. But there's a bunch of stuff you can do. So like opening the timeline, you can see when you created it. Now let's do a make, because this is really interesting. If I do, can I say I made it tomorrow? Beautiful. Let's go with that. I can add an image. I can literally, wow. Okay. That's fun. So I've got I created the recipe, and then Zaphod made this. I guess it's like you're scrapbooking your own cooking. That's kind of fun. Add that to favorites. Yes, sure. Why not? Then under the edit option here, there's a whole bunch of stuff you can say, like 4 hours. Prep time is 5 minutes. Cook time is therefore 3 hours, 55 minutes. My maths is correct. Here's a tried and true chocolate chip cookie recipe that will impress everybody, because that's important. Impressing other people is very important, apparently. Landscape, nutrition values. There's just so much stuff going on in this in Mealie. It really is fantastic. Categories. Let's create one of sweet treats, for example. There we go. So I think we get the idea, right? We can now add recipes. We can edit them, and really, I think it looks, as Jamie Oliver would say in the UK, it looks pucker. Looks pucker, mate. That's what it looks like to me. I love this app. There's a bunch of other stuff you can do, which I probably already showed you at the beginning of this video. So I guess we've got one more thing to do. One more thing, like Steve Jobs style. One more thing. It's not quite that good. But what we can do is we can actually upload and add images via AI. So I tried for about an hour, maybe 2, to get this working with Ollama locally over my Tailnet. I tried the FHI4 model. I tried the Quen 2.5 vision learning model as well with Ollama locally on this MacBook. And unfortunately, it was just not able to extract the images. So during the pandemic, during COVID, my wife was a subscriber to HelloFresh. In fact, she has a whole binder full of recipe cards that she's acquired over the years. And so I thought it'd be kind of fun to like digitize them as a project. And so I took a couple of pictures. In fact, let's do that with you now in real time, so to speak. And because these cards are two-sided, I'm not sure how well it's going to work, because I think I think Mealie can only process one picture at a time. So I'll just take this one of the ingredients right here. And then I'm going to use Taildrop to send those pictures from my phone to my computer. Because they're both logged into the same Tailnet, it's actually really easy. So if I click on the select button up there, and then I got these two, and I do this, I can then click on the tail scale option right there and select Baldric. That's now going to send those two files from my phone. Yes, technically it's an iPhone to a MacBook. I could just use AirDrop, But this would work to any device anywhere in the world over Tailscale, because Tailscale's awesome. I hope you think I know that by now, but genuinely, before I worked at this company, I was massively into self-hosting and, you know, doing Docker stuff and a podcast in the world of self-hosting, all that kind of stuff. And remote access was just a constant pain. It was port forwarding. It was like creating your own hand-cranked WireGuard configs for a little bit. OpenVPN this. It was just a nightmare. And honestly, now I don't have to worry about any of that with Tailscale. So lots of people ask me, Alex, why do you like Tailscale so much? And honestly, for me, it's because, well, it sounds like a bit of a sales pitch, but it just makes my life easier. And I hope you find it makes your lives easier too. So we've sent those images from our phone now to our computer. Let's bring up the Finder just to see what's going on. And here they are. In fact, I did some earlier, which I've already rotated. So you can see we've got those. It's a lovely pork katsu recipe. But as you can see, it's a double-sided thing. So what I'm going to do is just bring up Mealie now. And I'm going to click on Create from Image, and then I'm going to upload well, I should probably do the backside because that's the one that's got all of the instructions on it. And now it's going to go out to OpenAPI, which I generated an API key for at platform.openapi.com API keys. So I actually did this as a test earlier, and it used 4,700 tokens, which cost me 1 cent. So if you're worried about racking up a huge bill here, I mean, I limit this to $10 a month, and you can see I'm nowhere near. This will be when I was trying out Karakeep the other day too, I assume. So if you want to generate yourself an OpenAPI key, do that and put it into your Compose YAML file like so. And then Mealie will detect that automatically in its environment variables. And then you can click on Create. Now I'm going to bring up, in fact, if we leave that that terminal window. Now, it did take some time to process this earlier, maybe a minute or two. So it's not done a perfect job because the ingredients are sort of laid out without quantities and stuff. The ingredients on the front are perfect. Like Mealie, if you're watching this, if you can make it so I could upload 2 images, that would be the move right there. But you can see it's got all the ingredients. It just hasn't got the quantities quite right. But if you're looking to just sort of digitize things, like you could go in and modify these ingredients if you want to, or indeed, probably something that's just occurred to me, probably throw it into ChatGPT in the first place and then get the ingredients into a format that Mealie would like. Well, there you go. I mean, I know the AI stuff at the end was a little bit of a digression, but really this app is it's one that you probably lose an evening to messing about with, finding all the little features and little nooks and crannies where they've hidden stuff, and just the ability of like how to smoke a brisket, you know, being able to go to any website. Oh, yes, ads. Oh, more ads. Oh, but the ability of just being able to go to any website and then just paste in the URL, for me, that alone makes this this self-hosted application an absolute keeper. Like, you own the data until the end of time. Like, this is yours. You will always own this data. So even if smokedmeatsunday.com goes away, you've now got, I know you could print this out also, you kind of own that forever too, but sometimes it is better to just have your phone. Sometimes it's better to just have a tablet, whatever. Not sure if I'll get this app into production in this household, but I'm trying. I'm fighting the good fight. So there you go. That's how you deploy Mealie and put it on your Tailnet. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, I've been Alex from Tailscale.